I grabbed the wrong tray in the forensic cooler and saw our name dripping in red ink. My mother whispered, "Some families pass down recipes, we pass down bodies." For a second, I forgot how to breathe. The fan hummed overhead, the cold light buzzed, and that stainless steel room, that I had walked into for decades without flinching, suddenly felt like a crypt with my name carved inside it. The tag hanging from the end of the tray swung gently, as if someone had just let it go. The ink was still wet, beating on the laminate, our family name written in slow, careful letters. Mercer. My name. My father's name. My grandfather's before that. The name painted on the side of the funeral home when I was a boy, then on the sheriff's office when I grew up and pinned a badge to my chest. The name that, for better or worse, has always meant that when something goes wrong in this town, a Mercer will be standing in the middle of it. The cooler door eased shut behind me with a soft hiss. The trays lined the wall in neat, anonymous rows, each one holding the end of someone's story. I had seen every kind of ending in that room. Car wrecks, overdoses, quiet old age that finally ran out of breath. And sometimes, the kind of endings that kept you awake staring at your ceiling until the first light of dawn. But this was new. This was personal. I reached for the tag with a gloved hand and read it again, half expecting the letters to rearrange themselves, to become any other name but mine. The body on the tray was zipped into a white bag, the edges stiff with cold. The original label had been peeled away, its ghost outline still visible under the new one. Someone had done this on purpose. Someone wanted me to see it. Behind my eyes, memory flickered like an old home movie. My mother's voice, smoky from too many cigarettes, drifting through the embalming room of the funeral home where I grew up. The smell of chemicals and carnations. My small hand in hers as she guided me past the covered shapes laid out on metal tables. "Some families pass down recipes," she had whispered, half bitter, half proud. "We pass down bodies." Back then, I thought she meant work. Tradition. The strange inheritance of a family that handled death the way others handled wedding cakes or tax returns. I did not know there were parts of that inheritance she never spoke about. Shadows that clung to our name like smoke. "Sheriff?" The voice at the door snapped me back to the present. It was Dunn, our forensic technician, a good kid, new to the job, still pale around the eyes whenever a child or a young woman came in. "Everything okay in there?" he asked. I put the tag back, careful not to smear the ink. "Who labeled this one?" Dunn frowned behind his glasses as he stepped inside. "That is the Jane Doe we brought in from Miller's Bridge. Should still be under John Doe classification. Paperwork is on my desk." "Why?" He leaned around me, saw the tag, and went even paler. "That was not there when I logged her in," he said, voice tight. "I swear it, Sheriff. I used the standard white tags, black marker only. We do not even keep red ink in here." I believed him. Rookie or not, Dunn was methodical. The kind of man who double-checks the lock on his front door, even in a town where people still leave keys under flower pots. "Get the camera," I said. "Photograph everything exactly as it is. Do not touch that tag, do not wipe anything down. This is now part of a crime scene." He nodded and hurried out, leaving me alone with the humming fan, the humming light, and the body that someone had decided to tie to my family name. I unzipped the bag slowly. The chill rolled out, brushing against my face like a sigh. Inside, the young woman lay as if sleeping through a winter she never agreed to. Pale skin, faint freckles across the bridge of her nose, dark hair matted where rain had dried into it. There was a bruise along her right temple, shaped like the wrong end of a bad decision. We had found her the previous night beneath Miller's Bridge, face down in the shallow water, hair fanning like riverweed. No identification. No car nearby. Just the soft drag marks in the mud where someone had pulled her from the bank and rolled her in. Not an accident. Not a suicide. Someone had put her there with purpose. Looking at her now, under the cold light, she felt less like an exhibit and more like a question aimed directly at me. "Who are you?" I murmured. "And what do you want with my name?" I did not expect an answer, but this job will make you talk to the dead sometimes. It is easier than admitting there are questions you have no idea how to answer. The town outside that cooler is not much to look at on a map. A couple of intersecting roads. A river that runs too shallow in summer and floods just enough in spring to scare the old-timers. There is a diner that never closes, a hardware store that sells everything from nails to wedding rings, and a main street where you can stand in the middle at noon and not see more than 3 cars in either direction. But for the people who live here, it is the whole world. It is the way the air smells of pine and diesel. The way the train whistles in the distance just before dawn. The way everybody knows everybody else's business, and secrets cling like cobwebs in the corners of that knowledge. I have worn the badge in this town for more than 3 decades. I have buried more of its people than I care to count. I have watched kids I once pulled out of fights at the high school grow into men who bring their own teenagers to my office, eyes hollow, asking me where they went wrong. And still, nothing prepares you for the moment the job steps over the line and sits down at your own family table. When Dunn came back with the camera, the silence between flashes felt heavy and staged, like we were actors in someone else's script. White light click. White light click. Each shot a small, sterile attempt to make sense of something that was starting to feel very personal and very wrong. Run another sweep of the cooler security footage, I told him when he finished. The last 48 hours. I want to see every person who came in here, how long they stayed, what they touched. If the system hiccups, if there is so much as a second missing, I want you to flag it. Yes, Sheriff, he said. As he left, I zipped the bag closed again, the sound sharp in the cold room. Then I took a steadying breath and walked back into the fluorescent hallway of the county morgue, the soles of my boots squeaking faintly on polished linoleum. On the drive back to the station, the world felt both too bright and too small. Sunlight bounced off the hood of my car, off the old storefront windows, off the river where a couple of boys were casting lines and yelling at each other. Normal life, oblivious. That is the thing about crime. It does not stop the town. It just cuts through it like a quiet fault line, and most people never see the crack beneath their feet. I found out who our Jane Doe was that afternoon. The call came from a state trooper who had been sitting on a missing persons report from out of town. A young woman, mid-20s, last seen at a bus station 2 days earlier, said she was traveling through small communities for a research project. Her name was Hart. Once I had a name, she stopped being copy paper and file number. She became a person. We learned she had been renting a room above the diner for a few weeks, paying cash. She kept to herself but smiled a lot, according to the waitress. Drank her coffee black, wrote in a notebook with a frayed red cover while the rest of the world chewed its eggs and gossip. She had a backpack, a second-hand camera, and a way of listening that made people tell her things they did not usually say out loud. She was one of those quiet ones, Marlene, the owner of the diner, told me as she wiped down the counter. But it was not the scared kind of quiet. It was like she was always watching, always thinking. Asked about the town history more than anyone I ever met. The old highway, that fire back when I was a kid, the girls who went missing up by the county line. Said she liked stories. Said the truth hides in small places. My stomach tightened at that. The missing girls. That was not the kind of history locals brought up over coffee. Those cases were older than my badge, older even than some of the officers in my department, but not older than my memories. I had been a teenager when the first girl vanished. A college dropout working part-time at my father's funeral home, trying to pretend I did not hear the arguments behind the locked office door. My grandfather had been sheriff then. My father had been coroner. My mother had floated between them, carrying files and silence. 3 Mercers holding the official story in their hands. Some cases were labeled runaways. Others were called accidents, bodies never recovered. A few were left in that gray place between. Never solved, never officially forgotten. In a town like ours, people stop saying the names out loud long before they stop feeling them. Now here was a stranger, a young woman with a red notebook and too many questions, poking old wounds. And now she was dead, with my family name on her tray. Back at the station, I pulled her backpack from the evidence locker and spread its contents across my desk. Clothes rolled tight. A paperback novel with the corners bent. A cheap silver necklace. The red notebook, held closed with a rubber band. I opened it. Lily's handwriting slanted forward, confident and fast. She had dated each entry. Little sketches of buildings in the margins. Names of people she talked to. Snatches of overheard conversation. Notes about the town. About my town. On one page, she had written a list of years, all spelled out. Beside each year, a name. Some of those names I knew. Some I had only read on old reports in a dusty archive room, late at night when I could not quiet the feeling that something had been done wrong and preserved that way. Missing girls. An overpass. A gravel turnout. A section of river. At the bottom of the list, Lily had drawn a line and written one word. Mercer. She had circled it 3 times. I sat back in my chair, the springs creaking in protest. The walls of my office suddenly felt closer, as if the framed certificates and old case photos were leaning in to eavesdrop. Outside my door, The station hummed with its usual low buzz of radios and ringing phones. In here, there was only the ticking of the old clock on the wall and the echo of my mother's voice. We passed down bodies. I had always thought she was being morbid. Maybe she was trying to confess, and I had been too young to understand. I flipped to the last pages of the notebook. Lily had underlined a line from an old newspaper article. The paper's name was smudged, but I remembered the logo. It had been stacked in our kitchen, in my grandfather's office, in the waiting room at the funeral home, where people pretended to read while trying not to look at the closed doors. The underlined line said that Sheriff Charles Mercer had once again assured the community that there was no evidence of a serial predator in the area. Beside it, Lily had written in the margin, patterns. Same type of victim. Same stretch of road. Same county. Same family in charge. I closed the notebook and pressed my hands against my face. For a moment, I was not the sheriff. I was a boy again, hiding on the back stairs of the funeral home, listening to my father whisper that the department could not handle another panic, that certain investigations were better kept quiet. My mother's voice tight, asking what would happen if the truth ever seemed through. And my grandfather, lower and colder than both of them, saying, "Our job is to keep this town alive. That includes its reputation." I had wanted to believe they meant well, that they were caught in a bad time, making hard choices. But some choices rot over the years, and when they finally break the surface, they smell like this. Like a young woman on a slab, and your own name written over her. I started pulling old files that night. Cases from decades past. Missing persons. Unexplained deaths. Anything that brushed up against that old stretch of highway near the county line, or the river bends where the current turns sly. The records room smelled of dust and old ink, the scent of things the world had stopped caring about. Most of the files were thin. A few photos, faded to a sickly yellow. Statements that went nowhere. Handwritten notes in my grandfather's sharp, angular script. I read them until the lines blurred. In one file, tucked in the back, I found something that did not belong. A photo of my parents standing in front of the funeral home, smiling too wide for the occasion. On the back, in my mother's handwriting, was a date and 3 words. Before we knew. Before we knew what? I took the photo home with me that night. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes old floorboards remember every weight they ever carried. On the mantel, my parents' urns stood side by side, the polished metal catching the lamp light. My grandfather's badge lay framed above them, a neat little family shrine to service and duty. I stared at it for a long time. Then I went up to the attic. The air up there was thick with insulation dust and forgotten years. Boxes labeled in my mother's quick, impatient script were stacked along the walls. Holiday decorations. Old clothes. Paperwork she had promised to sort out one of these days, and never had. In the far corner, half hidden behind a trunk, I found a box with no label. Just our name, written once in red ink. The same kind of ink I had seen on the tray tag. My hands were not as steady as I would have liked when I opened it. Inside were clippings. Newspaper articles carefully cut and folded. Missing girl after missing girl. Handwritten notes in the margins, connecting dates and locations, circling phrases like "no foul play suspected," and "no evidence of criminal activity at this time." Underneath the clippings were photographs. Some of them were of my parents, younger, standing beside my grandfather in front of police cars and parade floats. Others were of crime scenes. A piece of cloth caught on a branch. Tire tracks in mud. A shoe half buried in leaves. At the very bottom of the box was a sealed envelope, brittle with age. My mother's handwriting on the front. For Samuel. For when the bodies return. I sat down hard on the floor. The attic creaked softly beneath me, as if the house itself was bracing for impact. I stared at the envelope for a long time before I tore it open. Inside was a letter. My mother's words, written long before she died in a hospital bed, long before she could imagine me standing in a forensic cooler with my name written in red. "Samuel," it began. "If you are reading this, it means the past has woken up." She wrote about the first girl. How my grandfather had insisted it was a runaway. How my father had found bruises that did not fit that story. How evidence went missing from the locker, replaced by signed forms saying nothing unusual had been found. She wrote about the second girl. And the third. By then, she said, the pattern was clear. Same type of victim. Same age range. Same roads. Same excuses. What I could not prove, she wrote, was who within our own house knew more than they said. I do not know if your grandfather covered up someone else's sins to protect the town, or to protect our name. I do not know what your father saw that he never told me. I only know that every time we closed a case that was not truly closed, we added another body to the weight we were passing down to you. She apologized over and over in those pages, for staying silent, for hoping it would stop on its own, for thinking that maybe the world would be kind enough to forget. And then at the very end she wrote, "If the bodies come back to you, they will be asking for something we never gave them. Do not make our mistake. Do not choose our name over the truth." The paper crinkled in my hands. For a long time, I did not move. Outside, the wind rattled the tree branches against the roof. In my chest, something old and heavy shifted. Lily Hart had come to our town digging for patterns, for truth hiding in small places, and someone had killed her for it. Someone who knew enough to tag her body with our name, in ink my mother had used before, as if to say, "This is your inheritance. Claim it." The question was who? Back at the station the next morning, Dunn met me with a grim face and a stack of printed stills. He laid them out on my desk. "We have got a gap," he said. "About 10 minutes of missing footage from the cooler camera, time-stamped the night after we brought Lily in. System log says it was a routine maintenance reset, but I did not run it. And I am the only one authorized to." On the page, the frozen images showed the cooler door, closed and unremarkable. The time-stamp jumped forward. Then the door stood exactly the same, as if the world had paused and restarted, and someone had erased everything that happened in between. "Who has admin access besides you?" I asked. He swallowed. "You. And Deputy Cole." "Cole. My cousin. He had been the golden boy once, the town's favorite Mercer, good at football and better at charm, the one everyone thought would go somewhere bigger than here. Instead, he had come back after a few years drifting, taken the badge, and settled into his role like it had been waiting for him all along. He worked the night Lily came in, signed the intake form, walked her down that hallway. I kept my voice as even as I could. "Is Cole on duty?" "He called in sick," Dunn said. "Said he had a stomach bug." Of course he did. I drove out to Cole's place alone. The road wound through thinning woods, the trees bare and reaching. His house sat back from the asphalt, an aging farmhouse with peeling paint and a porch that tilted slightly left. The kind of place that had seen too many storms and not enough repairs. His truck was in the driveway. The curtains were drawn. The yard was quiet except for a crow on the fence, watching me with blank interest. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, harder. "Cole, it is Sam. Open up." When he finally opened the door, he looked like he had not slept in days. Stubble on his jaw, eyes red-rimmed, shirt wrinkled. He smelled faintly of whiskey and sweat, the old cologne of men trying to drown something inside them. "Hey, Sheriff," he said, the title twisting oddly in his mouth. "You come to check on the invalid?" "I came to ask why there is 10 minutes of missing footage from the cooler," I said, "and why our name was written in red ink on a dead girl's tray." He laughed once, short and humorless. "Straight to the point. That is you, Sam. Always has been. Did you go into the cooler after the intake?" His gaze flickered, just for a moment, toward the hallway behind him. Then he stepped aside. "Maybe you should come in." The living room was cluttered with empty bottles and the kind of dust that gathers when a man stops caring about sunlight. On the coffee table lay a stack of old newspapers. I recognized the headlines before I saw the dates. "Missing girl. Community on edge. Sheriff urges calm." "You have been reading up," I said. Cole sank into an armchair and rubbed his temples. "You ever wonder why it has always been us?" He asked. "Mercer's in charge of the dead. Mercer's deciding what gets written down and what gets buried. You ever think maybe that is not a coincidence?" "I have been thinking about a lot of things lately," I said. "Start with the cooler, Cole." He looked up at me, and for a second I saw the kid he had been, sitting beside me on the back steps of the funeral home, his sneakers swinging, asking if dead people dreamed. "I tagged her," he said. "I changed the label." The air between us went still. "Why?" I asked. "Because she figured it out," he said. "Because she came into that diner and looked at this town like it was a puzzle and not a home. Because she asked the right old man the wrong questions, and he sent her to me like she was some kind of test." "Who?" "Old man Greeley," he said. "You know how he never shuts up when someone listens." She asked about the girls from back then. He told her how the sheriff always seemed to be there first. How the funeral home always had a body ready even when no one saw the ambulance go out. Greeley had a memory like a rusted bear trap. Slow to close, but once it did, it never let go. "She came to me at the station," Cole went on. Asked if I had ever noticed how many of the official reports from that time were missing pages. How your grandfather's signature shows up on every closure form. She was almost excited, like she had found herself a story big enough to make her name. She said sometimes the only way to move forward is to dig up what other people thought they buried. He laughed again, but there was no mirth in it. What did you tell her? I asked. I told her she should leave, he said. I told her some graves are better left alone. She just smiled that little smile of hers and said, "Truth does not care about your graveyards, deputy." He looked at his hands. I followed her that night, he whispered. Out near the bridge. I wanted to scare her off, that is all. Make sure she caught the bus out of town instead of sticking her nose where it did not belong. We argued. She tripped, hit her head on a rock. It happened so fast. He swallowed hard. She was still breathing, he said. I could have called it in. Could have taken her to the hospital. But then I thought about the headlines. Another girl. Same stretch of road. Same family in uniform. I saw your grandfather's face in those old photos, your father standing behind him. I heard people whispering our name like it was a curse. And I froze. He swallowed again, eyes glassy. I dragged her down to the water, he said. Put her face in. Held her there, just long enough to make it look like she had never tried to stand up again. When she stopped moving, I told myself it was an accident. That I was just finishing what the fall had started. Like that made it better. My heart was hammering so loudly, I could feel it in my throat. And the tag? I asked, my voice quiet. He looked up at me, and there was something wild in his eyes now. I read her notebook, he said. She had us all mapped out, Sam. Every missing girl, every signed form, every time a Mercer chose silence. I realized something. We have been inheriting this mess for generations. They passed it down to you, and now you have passed it down to me. I wrote our name on that tag because I wanted you to see what we really are. Not just the good guys in uniform. We are the ones who decide whose story gets told. And sometimes we are the ones who end it. I thought of my mother's letter. Of her plea that I not choose our name over the truth. You think writing our name on her body is some kind of confession? I said. Some grand statement about legacy? He shrugged, a broken motion. I think it is the only honest thing any of us have done about it. We sat in silence for a long moment. The house creaked around us. A car passed on the road outside, its engine fading into distance. I'm going to have to arrest you, I said eventually. He nodded. I know. You will have a lawyer. You will have your day in court. You will tell this story under oath, and the town will hear it. All of it. Not just what you did, but what was done before you. Do you understand? He looked at me, and for the first time since I walked in, there was a hint of relief in his eyes. Maybe that is the only way this ends, he said. Maybe the bodies stop when the lies do. I reached for my cuffs. My hands felt heavier than they ever had before. This was not some stranger, some faceless suspect on the wrong side of a file. This was blood. This was family. The child who used to fall asleep on my shoulder during long holiday sermons. The man who had held a line with me during floods and fires and long, bad nights. But he had also held Lily Hart's head under the water. No badge, no blood, no inherited burden could scrub that clean. The metal clicked shut around his wrists with a finality that made the air feel different. On the drive back to town, he stared out the window while I watched the road and the river and the ghosts between them. We passed the diner where Lily had written in her notebook, the bench where old man Greeley held court, the bridge where Cole had made a choice that turned an argument into a homicide. People talk about justice like it is something solid you can hold. In my experience, it is more like water. It takes the shape of whatever vessel you pour it into. A courtroom, a confession, a long overdue headline. In the weeks that followed, the investigation widened. The state sent in their own people to go through old files, to pull at the threads Lily had started gathering. Some of the answers were worse than others. Some we may never know. My grandfather was dead. My father and mother were ashes in urns. Their secrets, whatever they were, had already taken root in the story of this town. But something shifted. People started saying the names of those missing girls again, out loud, in grocery store aisles and church parking lots and long, midnight phone calls. They started asking questions that had sat unsaid for too many years. I met with Lily's parents in a small conference room that smelled of old coffee and disinfectant. They had traveled a long way to see the place their daughter had died. Her mother held a photo of Lily taken on some sunny afternoon, her hair caught mid-laugh. I am sorry, I told them. The words felt inadequate, but they were true. She deserved better from this town, from this department, From my family. Her father nodded slowly. She died doing what she believed in, he said. She always said stories mattered more than comfort. If the truth comes out because of her, that is something. I did not tell him about the tag, about my name dripping in red ink from the tray she lay on. Some details are cruel without being useful. What mattered was that her story would not be buried, that the article she had been working on, reconstructed from her notes and drafts, would be finished and published. When her piece finally ran, it did not just talk about our town. It talked about patterns across places like ours all over the country. It talked about families that hold power for so long they forget it is not the same as righteousness. It talked about the cost of silence, measured in lives. My name was in there more than once. So was my grandfather's, my father's, my cousin's. Reading it felt like standing naked in the middle of Main Street at noon. But it also felt, in a strange and terrible way, clean. On a gray morning not long after the trial date was set, I went back to the forensic cooler. Old habit, maybe. Or maybe I just needed to see that room one more time with new eyes. The trays were all properly labeled in standard black ink. No red in sight. The fan still hummed. The light still buzzed. Death does not care who you are. It just keeps coming. I stood there a while, hands in my pockets, listening to the cold air move. My mother's words floated up again, softer this time. Some families pass down recipes. We pass down bodies. I had spent my whole life thinking that meant we were tied to death in a way other people were not. That we were somehow separate from the world we served, standing between the living and the dead like guardians. Now I know better. We are all part of the same story. The difference is whether we choose to tell it honestly, to admit the parts where we failed, to carry the weight we inherited without pretending it is something noble when it is not. I reached out and touched the edge of the tray where Lily had once lain, a small, respectful gesture to an empty space. Our family passes down something else now, I said quietly to the humming fan, to the rows of silent forms, to the ghosts that might be listening. We pass down the truth, even when it hurts. Then I turned off the light, stepped out of the cooler, and let the door close behind me.